gathering, which marks two significant occasions. The first is a milestone, and that is the publication of the 100th issue of Working Notes. As if I was around for the previous 99, I just showed up for the 100th. That's our journal. And then the second is a sad but a very fond farewell to our social theologian, Dr. Kevin Hargaden. So Kevin will deliver a lecture this evening inspired by his Working Notes essay on social theology. And afterwards there will be time for questions and discussions, chance to engage with Kevin, whether by asking a question or a comment, or if you really want to embarrass him and make him uncomfortable, to give him some praise and words of appreciation for how much you appreciate him and for everything he's been for us over the last decade. So do lavish him with heartfelt words. We will then move into a short panel discussion with the other members of the JCFJ team who have also contributed essays to Working Notes 100, and our evening will conclude at around 9 p.m. Kevin, before you take the podium, please allow me to say something about the gift that you have been to the Jesuit Centre for Faith and Justice and to the Irish Jesuit province over the last decade. As a colleague, you have been exceptionally hardworking. You are someone who is always willing to go back to the well, to think more deeply, to read more widely, and to wrestle with difficult questions. While you excel, obviously, in individual scholarship, you've also been deeply collegial. You invite others into work with you, you collaborate generously, and you genuinely delight in the success of your teammates. And I think you've had a lot to be happy about then over your years with us. I think I speak for the whole team when I say that your presence in the centre played a significant part in attracting the rest of us to JCFJ, and that's myself included. We have all been enriched by your companionship, your friendship, and your authentic Christian witness and leadership. And on a personal note, I'm very grateful, especially grateful for the support you've given me in transitioning into the role of director, and you've always been available with wise advice and encouragement, so thank you for that. When somebody is recruited by the University of Notre Dame as a professor, obviously it's somebody with formidable intellectual and academic acumen, so that goes without saying for you, Kevin. Just to give some testimony in that closer to home, recently I was interviewing Jane Mellett from Trócaire as part of our own strategic review, and she said, "Is it true now that Kevin's leaving JCFJ and going to America?" And I said, "It is." And she said, "Oh, we're really going to miss him." And I said, "Okay, this is an interview, so why are you going to miss him?" And she said, "Brain power." So that was something, just the insight you brought to all those meetings, Kevin, and was really appreciated in very wide circles. It's not just the depth of your knowledge, it's the breadth of it that gives your writing and analysis such richness. The familiar image of a Christian as somebody with the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other, it doesn't really do you justice, because alongside them you also have multiple academic journals, a podcast, novels, and the latest musical releases, all enriching your thoughts. And most importantly as well, you also have the wisdom of your children, who are also there sharing their insights into life with you, and it's lovely to hear you speak about them so lovingly. So I'd say the breadth of your learning is matched by the breadth of your relationships and friendships. You have built relationships with people from every social background, every political persuasion, different Christian traditions, other faiths, and many academic and professional disciplines. You are even friends with a few neoliberals, which, if nothing else, is a testament to your generosity of spirit. You truly do have a remarkable gift for building bridges between people who might otherwise never engage. Most importantly, Kevin, you have placed all these gifts at the service of those on the margins, the poor, the excluded and the oppressed. Like St. John Chrysostom, you recognise them as the Church's true treasury. Your commitment to justice has never been detached from your faith. You unapologetically pursue justice, and you do so unapologetically as a Christian. It is very easy to see why the University of Notre Dame has invited you to join its Institute for Social Concerns as Professor of Moral Theology, where you will continue to promote justice in an interdisciplinary way, and our loss is certainly their gain. Kevin, thank you for all that you have given to the Centre, to the Jesuits, and to so many of us personally. We wish you, Claire, and the children every blessing as you begin this new chapter. Dear friends, for one last time, as JCFJ's social theologian, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Kevin Hargaden.
It's never been difficult for me to give lectures. Talking is one of the skills that I have natively, but it's very difficult to follow that. And later now, over a pint, we'll have a conversation about comparing me to John Chrysostom. In fact, a very good friend of mine, a major inspiration of me and Claire's was Aidan Matthews, and he's in the room. And Aidan was a radio producer. And me and Claire used to do like Thought for the Day on RTE Radio 1. And like Aidan, from when I was a teenager, his short stories were blowing my mind. I didn't know he was a Christian. I didn't know anything about the kind of world, the amazing intellectual world that he inhabits. But it was an amazing honour for me to meet a hero who wasn't a complete. It's being recorded. And so, every time I got to do one of these, I would like pour my life into it, and they went okay. And then for the last one, Aidan said to me, it's going to be unfortunate now that we can't record you and Claire anymore. Claire has a beautiful voice.
So true.
So true. You, he said, have a wet palate. I still don't know what it means. John Chrysostom was golden tongued. So, listen, there are, as you can see, so many aspects of my work at the Jesuit Centre for Faith and Justice that I'm going to miss. So many. To the extent that, when the University of Notre Dame came calling, we took months to deliberate, and it was a very difficult decision for many, many reasons. Well, primarily because I love working here. But there's one thing that I will not miss, to be honest, and it is this job title, Social Theologian. How ironic to be asked to give a farewell lecture, and it's intended to be a manifesto for whatever it is we mean by social theology. And almost 10 years into this role, I still don't know what social theology means. I'm slightly disappointed that even after all these years, the Jesuits haven't given me like a budget for taking people for pints, which is the obvious meaning of what social theology would be. So I wrote this essay in Working Notes 100, and if you haven't got Working Notes, then you can subscribe for free, and it's brilliant out there. I wrote it to try to work out what it meant. It is a title that manages to confuse almost everyone. If you mention social theology to a secular policymaker, they look at you with the mild pity reserved for someone who is uttering a complete oxymoron. Religion in modern Ireland is meant to be a private affair. So at best they think that I'm trying to pass something off that's dodgy with good marketing, like jumbo shrimp. Or I'm just engaged in straight out self-contradiction, organised chaos. But then there's a certain kind of Christian, on the other hand, and the term seems to them like a pointless redundancy. After all, if Christianity is a social religion rooted in the people of God, isn't all theology inherently social? Isn't that what we're meant to be about? Or if, for other people, other Christians, if Christianity is essentially a religion that's about escaping this veil of tears and securing a place in some utopian afterlife, well, they also don't like this because they think this talk of social theology is a little bit dodgy, a little bit liberal, a little bit watering things down. So, I'm either distrusted because of the term theology, or because of the term social. But one thing that this skepticism does succeed, as Niall has already alluded to, is it draws people together who usually don't hang out. And it's a good question to explore because there is no easier path in today's academic world to success than defining a nuance at the end of a nuance at the end of a nuance. And thereby making yourself seem like an intellectual revolutionary. Right? You can go out on the isthmus of knowledge and then just build a tiny little pier out there. And then, funding can come your way. If you're creative enough with your definition, you can trick the bureaucratic machinery of the Department of Education to fund loads of PhD scholarships and to publish some massive tomes that no one will ever read. Even if we thought we could be successful in that endeavour, and I don't think I have it in me, that does not interest me. As those of you who have read the article in Working Notes, which is him and me, I have fun in the footnotes. And my favourite footnote is this one. From, don't Google Robert Heinlein politics, but he was a very important sci-fi writer of the 20th century. He says, a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, coon a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. We can all do that, right? And the punchline is, of course, specialization is for insects. These artificial disciplinary boundaries may seduce funding bodies, but they rarely suit the messiness of human existence. So my first move here is, if you're interested in what theology is, it's a subject that predates all of these artificial distinctions. And we call ourselves the Queen of the Sciences. Nobody believes we're the Queen of the Sciences except us, but what that does mean is that we should be entitled to wander into other people's conversations, listen in patiently and carefully, and perhaps maybe contribute across the boundaries. So the ambiguity of my job title maybe isn't a flaw. We can embrace it. It gives me permission to cross borders, to step down from ivory towers, and to sit comfortably in that in-between space where faith meets public life. Now, a real academic would have used the word liminal there instead of in-between space. But don't worry, they'll beat this out of me in Notre Dame. 4-syllable words, up the yin yang. Now, in the essay, now you don't have to read it, I try to wrestle once again with the thing that I'm always wrestling with, which is the great tension of being a theologian, especially one who unashamedly sees themselves as an ecclesial theologian, a theologian who wants to speak with and help the churches. How do you do that in contemporary Ireland? What right have we to say anything at all? Many of you in this room have wrestled with this question in your own way, but after the deep decay of the abuse scandals, would it not be better for us to just take a place on the sidelines and engage in kind of self-imposed penitential silence? That could be good for us, and it could be good for society. And in the essay, I cite one of the great works of Irish literature in this century, Clara Keegan's luminous novella, Small Things Like These. She brilliantly captures the old Ireland through a conversation between the hero, Bill Furlong, and a publican, Mrs. Keogh. This is in a town in Wexford. When Furlong questions the unchecked authority of the local convent, Mrs. Keogh counsels that he should pursue a path of quiet compliance. She says, "Keep the bad dog with you, and the good dog will not bite." To which Furlong quietly counters, "Surely they've only as much power as we give them." For generations, Irish society operated under passive compliance, submitting to a range of institutional moral authorities. It wasn't just the church. But that monopolistic moral authority has crumbled, and it's been replaced, as we see day by day, week by week in the JCFJ, with a kind of administrative neutrality. And I don't lament this at all. I urge all Christians in the room to join with me in wrestling to resist the pull of nostalgia and sentimentality, especially the kind that passes over the truth of the harms that were done in the name of God. But this brings me to the core thesis of my argument, and it's not this deep all the way through. I just have to tell you what I'm wrestling with. Social theology is not an attempt to execute a rearguard action to reclaim the lost moral authority of the church. It does not seek to lecture society from an imaginary ethical high ground, and nor does it issue, I'm prone to issuing top-down pronouncements, but social theology pursued would not sanction that. Rather, it represents a shift from a theology of control to a theology of contribution. Its task is not merely to point towards an idealized, distant horizon of justice, but to do the painstaking, unglamorous work of mapping an actual path that gets there. It sits at the intersection where ancient arguments about human dignity meet concrete contemporary policy arrangements. My colleagues have done the heavy lifting on this in so many ways, and I am quietly astonished that the church is not more interested in the work of Kieran Murphy and Keith Adams and Alexia O'Brien and Sophie Maneva, and I suppose as well. The JCFJ has blazed a trail, and they've marshalled the technologies of geographic information systems. They've deployed rigorous qualitative research methods, and they've done all of this always displaying a deep love of the Christian tradition, intended to intervene on the critical social questions of our day: the climate breakdown and biodiversity collapse, the housing and homelessness crisis, the injustice of our prison systems, and the rise of racism in our society. By drawing on the social sciences without sacrificing the gospel roots, social theology echoes Augustine's insight that politics is not about winning. Politics is fundamentally a negotiation. Here's the theology bit: a negotiation about the loves that we hold in common. That's why I can be friends with the neoliberals. Even though they drive me demented. They also love maternity leave. They just wish that it was means tested. And they also love libraries. They just think that there's a real profit opportunity left on the table. And it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, I can meet you and find that you are in fact motivated to cultivate and sustain the things that are beautiful in our society. That's what politics is. It's not winning opinion polls, and it's not having the witty retort in the debate on television. It's not about just simply voting every 5 years. So what am I saying? I'm saying that actually in this post-secular society, Christianity provides a humble, coherent vocabulary that proves that our love for our neighbour is only as real as the actual structures that we're willing to build around them. So I spent last week on retreat. I mean, it makes me sound very Jesuitic. Off on retreat. I was actually climbing mountains with my my best friends, but it was a wonderful time. And the best, it was a wonderful time. But every morning began in prayer, right? And then every day was taken up by climbs, fairly intense climbs, sometimes truly intense. And then when we arrived at wherever we were staying, some hut somewhere, a really well-built kind of Dolomite hut, we'd gather again and we'd discuss theology for an hour or two or three. Man, we were the oddest group in Northern Italy. And when you're tracing a path like that, the conversations can become very rich. And I'm still digesting all that we learned. Our focus was, how do you teach theology today? But I want to share with you something quite obvious that I realized on these walks, an insight that I stumbled over, quite literally. When you're tracing a path along a barely existing ridge, 8,000 feet in the air, it really is important that you avoid the drops on both sides. I have a totally fresh appreciation of what Jesus was getting at when he described the Christian life as the narrow path. And I have an even keener sense right now of the threat involved. If social theology is about mapping a practical path towards justice, we have to admit that this particular path is flanked by two very steep and dangerous ditches. If we lean too far to the right, you fall down the slope of quietist sectarianism. I'll explain those fancy words. And if you drop too far to the left, you end up sliding towards a devastating and incredibly tedious technocratic dilution. So let me explain that. If we fall to the right, we find ourselves caught up in the temptation to penitential weakness, which I alluded to earlier. It's something I'm tempted by. Given a history of institutional scandals in the church, the impulse to retreat into a self-imposed silence is understandable. It feels humble, it feels safe. It is the temptation to build a high theological wall, put up the drawbridge, and establish a holy huddle. This is especially a temptation to me because I was so formed by a theologian, a great American thinker called Stanley Hauerwas. He spent his whole life being misread by people, mostly Americans, who concluded that because he was so clear about how compromised liberal democracies are, that they read him and said the church's only remaining task is to build an ecclesial bunker and to form alternative communities until the storm passes. He hates when people interpret his work this way, if only because he knows how deeply abuse has gotten into the heart of the church. People say my theology is the theology of retreat, he lamented to me one night over pizza. Very bad pizza, because we were in Hargaden. And he said, I'd love to retreat. But where is the church going to retreat to when its biggest threats are within the walls? So as attractive as quietism is, and there are lots of Christian traditions in the Anabaptist scene. I think particularly of a group called the Bruderhof. You should look them up, they're magnificent. There are coherent ways in which Christians can set themselves apart from society. That's not available to the Catholic tradition. It simply won't allow us to even apply for planning permission for a bunker. Right? Gaudium et Spes famously insisted that the joys and the anxieties of the people of this age are the joys and anxieties of the followers of Christ. Gaudium et Spes is the constitution of the Second Vatican Council, so it's right up there as the pillar of the church. And that means we can't retreat. Pope Francis didn't picture the church as a gated sanctuary. He called it a field hospital. And as I remind myself every time I remember my many failed attempts to become good at baking bread, leaven, yeast, is completely useless if you leave it in a sealed jar on the shelf. So that's the first trap. We can't just satisfy ourselves with saying there's quite a few of us left. Let's just get busy being righteous and holy on our own. The second trap is what I'm going to call the technocratic dilution. Technocratic is a big word that Pope Francis uses, so I'm allowed to use it. This is where we're so desperate for a seat at the table where decisions get made, that we sanitize every trace of distinctive Christian thought and theological language out of what we have to say. We translate, this is the key word from kind of 20th century theologians, we translate our deep moral convictions into administrative jargon, where the translation just renders everything that we have that's interesting mute. So we sound like everyone else. Sometimes people on boards, and there are members of the JCFJ board here, and I'm not talking about you, they talk about impact. The quickest way to increase our impact in this moment would be to trade out all this talk about the Imago Dei and to become fluent in evidence-based metrics and stakeholder alignment and cost-benefit analyses. But that path will be a temporary success. It's Stanley Hauerwas' worst nightmare. Theologians who've surrendered our foundational narrative to the social sciences, hoping that our secular pals won't notice the theology that attracted us in the first place to these questions of profound justice. And also, we hope that the religious bodies that we rely on don't notice that we've become so embarrassed to talk about Jesus in our policy briefs. So the problem here is straightforward. If we only bring social science to the civil service, we offer nothing that they couldn't get cheaper and faster, probably better, from a commercial consultancy firm. Social scientific methods, our spatial data, our responsive interviews, our social epistemologies, these are vital tools, but they are the map. They are not the real thing. The engine is the radical, inconvenient conviction of the Christian tradition that human beings possess an irreducible dignity and that politics is negotiation about the loves that we share in common. So social theology has to walk this fine line. We refuse to bunker because we love our neighbours too much to leave them to just secular efficiency, and we refuse the trap of technocracy because we know that policy without a soul quickly degenerates into administrative cruelty and astonishing blind spots. So how do we actually put this into practice? We do it by speaking directly and differently to the four corners of the room. So, there are theologians, and there are Christian leaders, and there are what I'm calling mere Christians, because I love C.S. Lewis, and then there's everyone else, our other allies. The dominant theological approaches of our day, I need to be clear, are not deficient. Work being done in Maynooth, or DCU, or TCD, or the IBI, many other places around this island should be treasured. When I present to you social theology, I'm not saying that the other theologies are in any way deficient. Theology provides us with these indispensable tools, the precise vocabulary, and the deep historical traditions that we need. When I talk about a theology of contribution, I do not mean to suggest that systematic theologians aren't also making a contribution, or the others as well, or practical theologians. Rather, it's an attempt to explain how what we have done here in JCFJ is slightly different. It simply asks if there are other ways that those rich intellectual gifts can serve the immediate, messy, and contested geography of our shared city. Systematic reflection and empirical social analysis are not competitors. They are partners. Deep theoretical theological work clarifies what we are trying to say when we talk about God. And the kind of deep empirical work that we have done might help us map where and how those words apply in real time. To see what happens when profound theological commitments are brought into direct, collaborative conversation with urban reality, we need look no further than a real-world concrete setting right on our doorstep, which is our recent research report, Faith in the Northeastern City. There are copies available on the desk outside. Richard Carson and Adrian Christea are collaborators on this project in the room, so this is really very good. So, how do we put this into practice? We do it by speaking directly to theologians, church leaders, ordinary Christians, and people who are otherwise motivated towards social justice. So first to the theologians. My academic colleagues and theologians in the room, rigorous theoretical work is the bedrock of everything we do. Without high-altitude systematic clarity, our social action becomes well-intentioned activism without a compass. However, a theology of contribution invites us to ensure that our richest theoretical concepts, ideas like divine sovereignty, grace, solidarity, human dignity, the common good, are given the opportunity to do heavy lifting in these messy empirical contexts. As I leave JCFJ, a space opens up whereby, if there is someone in the room who is so inclined, who's a theologian, you can reach out to my colleagues with the ideas that you have and begin to collaborate with them. You have skills, they have skills. It's the beginning of a good story of those skills are brought together. An example of where our theologizing is helpful here, or where our theologizing is led, would be helpful here. So in the aftermath of the riots in November 2023, we set out to map the faith communities in the northeast inner city and discover how they were working to reweave the social fabric. In Ulysses, James Joyce famously had Leopold Bloom use that a good puzzle would be to cross Dublin without passing a pub. Software developers finally solved that puzzle in 2011 using complex algorithms. You can actually cross the northeast inner city without passing a pub. But if Bloom were walking through Dublin's northeast inner city today, the real puzzle would be trying to cross that same street, those same streets, without passing a living, praying, serving, faith-based community. We found no fewer than 49 distinct faith-based communities operating within a porous, tightly packed inner city footprint. And I think Alexia is fairly confident that we have more than 49 if we were to make it again. They range from historic mainline parishes to Sunni and Shia mosques, Indian Orthodox congregations, Roma Pentecostals, African Evangelical fellowships, and a yoga shala. When we look at a Roma Pentecostal congregation evicted from a Parnell Street bakery site due to student housing redevelopment, who are forced to navigate city transport to meet them in Chicor, our theological frameworks around displacement, justice, and sanctuary are given immediate human faces. When we hear about a Muslim teenager who's blocked from using the prayer space in her school because of extremism, we begin to see structural sin, racist bias, and the dark side of contemporary secularity in a very uncomfortable, bright light. There are many such examples, but this isn't meant to be a lecture rehashing that report. Although I will say that Asa and Dublin City Interfaith are recruiting. What's the exact job title?
Faith liaison.
Faith liaison officer. So, I mean, if this sounds really good to you, you should talk to those two lads afterwards, because they've got a salary to do exactly what we said should be done. There's a French theorist, he's a Jesuit, but I didn't quote him just because he's a Jesuit. Michel Dessertue, and he has this book called The Practice of Everyday Life. And he says that a city cannot be fully understood from the totalizing 110th floor viewpoint of the urban planner, right? It's known through the passers-by, those who walk the pavement and write unwritten stories with their feet. This is him. So often in our policy work, we encounter what we might call the subtraction story of religion. The assumption is that religious communities inevitably recede as a society modernizes. We think that this is actually the prevailing common sense in Ireland today, that just religion is going to die away because it's no longer needed. We're just subtracting all of these superstitions away from our life, and eventually we'll just finally be pure secular people. But we know in a very concrete fashion that religion has not vanished from this city. What's happened is that it's multiplied and diversified and re-enchanted the urban landscape from below. Empirical tools like qualitative interviews or GIS mapping do not dilute our theological integrity, they enhance it. They allow us to talk about our shared theological commitments in visible coordinates, in terms that the wider public can understand and engage with. So there's my appeal to theologians. You can use the empirical tools of social sciences, and it doesn't dilute the gospel. It translates our love for the neighbour into coordinates that the public can actually see. And if that sounds interesting to you, then Keith will receive an email gladly. So the second group then is the Christian leaders. However we interpret that. You don't need to be told that the era of the church operating as moral monopoly or a cultural magistrate in Ireland has passed. And nobody laments that. I've yet to meet church leaders. I wish we were back in the 1970s. We might not know how to deal with being in 2026, but we know that in many ways it's so much better than being in 1956. And if we want to see what moral authority might look like for us in this post-confessional era, we can look again at how faith communities in the northeastern city operate every single day. They rely on presence, proximity, and practical service to build rapport with their neighbours. They might not be known outside of their own little micro-community, but they are known there. Our study demonstrated that faith communities are consistently the first port of call for newcomers arriving in Dublin. When an international protection applicant arrives from Central America with lost baggage, or a healthcare worker arrives from Kerala, they often don't look first for the government office, they look for their community of faith. They find a room where someone speaks their mother tongue, where someone can source airbeds, where someone can find them warm clothing, food, where someone who's done it before can walk them through the labyrinth of securing a PPS number or finding a GP or registering their children for school. These radical acts of hospitality are also entirely mundane acts of hospitality, and I suspect that's where Christian leaders should be directing their energy. That's my gentle suggestion. Whatever the level of leadership you're at, we're already getting used to working in a field hospital in the Irish Church. So again, we should lean into that. If we want to speak into public policy on housing or climate or penal reform or migration, our words can no longer rely on intellectual muscle. We just don't possess it anymore. The era of issuing sweeping, top-down pastoral pronouncements on complex social economic realities where we haven't done difficult policy work is definitely over. I know this because I wrote a pastoral letter on immigration for the Irish bishops, and the only person who cared about it was David Quinn. And you can guess what he thought. In a post-confessional Ireland, authority will not be granted to us because of the collar we wear or the title that we carry. It will only be earned because of the humility of our listening and the courage of our solidarity with the marginalised and our willingness to roll up our sleeves, pump up the airbeds, and map a path to justice that our neighbours can actually follow. And so then I turn to the Christians. There's lots of overlap in the groups here. I would hope that all the Christian leaders are also mere Christians. And I know that even some of the theologians are Christians. It's hard for you to believe. When I say mere Christians, I'm not insulting them. I'm citing C.S. Lewis, who was a book that was very important for me when I was an atheist and did not want to know anything about Christianity. and his book was relentlessly clear, and I wasn't able to argue with it. So I'm honouring our good Belfast friend. Christians are an incredibly diverse group in contemporary Ireland. If you go to church on a Sunday now, you are as likely to find yourself sitting beside someone from Accra or Manila as from Athlone or Mullingar. Regardless of where you find yourself on the denominational map, if you are a follower of Jesus, I want to call on you to consciously resist the dual temptations of this moment. This is where Niall has been very helpful for me. On one side lies the temptation of hyper-individualism. This is the idea that faith is merely a private, therapeutic consumer choice designed to give you peace while the world burns around you. On the other side lies the temptation of reactionary populist rage. This is marked by a fear-driven politics that scapegoats the stranger and feeds on resentment. I don't spend enough time on Facebook, but I hear that this is where you go to get it, or Instagram or X. In some prominent cases, actually, you can find that both of these pathologies exist in the same person. Evidence of either is a sign that we need to renew our discipleship. What our research in the northeastern city suggests is that there is a particular importance in Christians who are long established in Ireland, standing up vocally and firmly for the dignity of the newcomer in our midst. If you're a Christian who was born in Ireland, it is really important that you raise your voice when the comments are made, whether that's at work, or whether it's at the pub, or whether it's at the football match. It's really important that people hear you say, that's not true. The body of Christ in Ireland is radically diverse, and we must oppose anti-immigrant nonsense at its source, because to fail to do that is to amputate our own body. It is to deny our brother or sister in Christ. And here's something interesting that our research revealed. For migrant and minority populations, a faith community is uniquely both locative and translocative. This is my fancy way of saying that the people who have arrived in Ireland more recently, they dig down roots deep in a place, locative, and they build bridges for that place that they're in back to other communities elsewhere in the world, enriching their community. So it's locative because it roots you firmly in your immediate physical location, allowing you to fall in love with your neighbourhood, whether that's Gardner Street, or Talbot Street, or Sheriff Street, or wherever. And it is translocative because it links you symbolically across global borders to your homeland, while pointing vertically to the transcendent reality of God, because you're living in community with your brother and sister in Christ who's been in Sheriff Street, for generations. In this way, every single migrant adds to the riches of the place where they settle. They create a kind of portal that links one place here to other places far away. Catholic means universal. And the migrant is not a threat to the Catholic imagination. The migrant is a gift that God has sent us. So what we know is that faith communities are unique engines in our society for generating both social bonds, that is, weaving the community together, and social bridges, that is, connecting communities to other communities. When anti-immigrant riots tore through these parts of Dublin in November 23, local faith communities acted as crucial social firebreaks. Pastors, imams, and mere believers spent that weekend on WhatsApp groups and on the ground, checking on vulnerable families, debunking dangerous rumours, offering physical protection, and speaking words of calm, grounded peace. Ordinary worshippers are building those mediating structures, parish advice desks, food pantries, language exchanges, youth clubs, that restore the social fabric from the bottom up. Your faith, if you're one of those mere Christians, your faith equips you with the moral vocabulary to love your neighbour in concrete, structural ways. You simply have to have the boldness to use a good New Testament word to test your own strength. And so finally, I'll talk to the other allies. In the Catholic social tradition, papal encyclicals are addressed to the faithful and to people of goodwill. It's all very patronising, but well-meaning. That means I'm not. There are some people here who don't fit into the overlapping circles that I've laid out thus far, and I turn to you at last, and I call you my allies. I hope that you don't resent that. These people in the room maybe work as, you have to project from the diaphragm. Maybe they work as in as civil servants, maybe they work in civil society, maybe they're involved in politics, some other task of justice. And the first thing that I have to say to you is thank you for joining in the conversation. Given Ireland's history of institutional overreach from the church, a hesitation regarding religious language is understandable. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
But we ask you to look at the empirical reality of Dublin streets today. The theologian Luke Bretherton makes a crucial distinction that helps frame healthy civic partnership. He talks about the difference between secularity and secularism. Secularity is a healthy, pluralistic political framework that creates a shared public space where people of all deep convictions. Well done. Thank you, Vera. So secularity is this healthy, pluralistic political framework that creates a shared public space where people can bring their deep convictions and actually articulate them. I don't know, I'm going to go back in time here, but does anyone remember when Katie Taylor won the gold in London Olympics? And afterwards, the RT journalist met her coming out of the ring and asked her for a comment, and she quoted the Psalms, and she said, all glory to God, like a Brazilian footballer. Nobody in the history of RT has been more embarrassed. People were like, quick, get the camera off, she's talking about religion. I mean, we can laugh about it, and I'm sure Katie Taylor was in no way pissed off about that. She doesn't think about that when she thinks about the day. But there is a discomfort about religious belief that is just fundamentally immature, if nothing else. And so secularity is that creating a space where people can come and be themselves. If we do not create that space, then there are a whole load of second-generation Irish people who are about to arrive on the scene with something to give us. But they are Pentecostal Christians, and God damn it, they're going to tell you. Or they are devout Muslims, and they have deep convictions that are not going to be just pushed aside because you refuse to acknowledge them. And if we don't allow people to articulate themselves as they are, they will find alternative spaces, and we will be diminished because they go elsewhere. And we can talk to Belgium and France and to other European countries about what happens when we create a public square where religious belief, especially minority religious belief, is not tolerated. So secularity is what we should aim at. Secularism can become an ideological project that attempts to enforce an artificial, state-mandated, neutral religious blindness that banishes faith into the private sphere. It's attractive. I understand its attractions. But in processing, in actual outworking, what it will produce is a situation where people are choosing to either mute themselves to participate in public, or they won't participate in public at all. So our research revealed that there was this, what we call religious illiteracy across the public bodies. People are terrified of religion. One community activist summarized the official attitude really candidly when she said, you can give them bells, meaning church bells, but you can't have a call to prayer. Right? And we know instinctively that's true. The church can ring its bells, but a mosque, calling to prayer, we don't want that. And I want people to sit with that discomfort and to really think about what kind of society are we making if we're going to say that a large minority of our people just aren't allowed to express the fundamental thing of their life in public. We interviewed city officials, Keith is going to laugh when I say this one, who acknowledged that the state bodies are uncomfortable dealing with faith groups. Basically said, I don't know anything about any of these groups. The person, anyway, we won't name their names. We heard of planners who say that they absolutely refuse to do business with churches. We've documented cases, as I alluded to, where schools locked prayer rooms out of a mistaken fear of extremism. Instances where faith-based charities were asked to remove the word prayer from room signage, or else they would lose their funding. When the state invested significantly in the Northeast Inner City Initiative following gangland violence about 10 years ago, its progress reports basically overlooked all of these faith-based communities. These communities that are providing social safety nets, mental health accompaniment, addiction support, youth integration across the district. We're not asking for special confessional privileges here. We're not asking for state money to evangelize. We're asking for equal treatment, basic civic literacy, and a sensible structural partnership where it's appropriate. We don't need people to sign our creeds before they work alongside us. But if we want a city that flourishes, we cannot afford to ignore the massive reserves of social capital, civic trust, and voluntary energy that are present in Dublin's places of worship. So administrative neutrality has its place. Nobody wants a city council that checks your catechism before they fix the pothole outside your house or issuing a planning permit. But administrative neutrality shouldn't become operational blindness. You don't need to share our hope in the resurrection to share our conviction that an unhoused family sleeping on Gardner Street is an intolerable moral failure. And to come back again to my North African hero, Augustine, and his insistence that politics is a negotiation about the loves we hold in common. What this means is that our shared love for this city and its people gives us more than enough common ground to stand on. Believers can bring our vocabulary, secular folk can bring theirs, and together we can build a Dublin where every neighbour actually has a place to call a home. So, where does all this leave us as I hand back my office keys, which I've done, and I gave someone else, I gave Kira the credit card. Don't worry, I used it beforehand. And I surrendered the title of social theologian. Yeah.
Until somebody else picks it up.
I have here, I'm trying to figure out where I can get purple snack bars in South Bend, but they gave me 15 purple snack bars over dinner. That cost me like €700. But to explain that, I give myself a purple snack bar every time I write 1,000 words. That's how I'm productive. So where does this leave us? I think we're at the edge of a beautiful horizon. That the Church in Ireland, Christians in Ireland, should actually be excited about what God is doing, instead of constantly dismal about the fact that we're apparently going to go extinct. There's a transition from a post-Catholic Ireland to a post-secular Ireland, and that's a place where people of faith can actually make a difference. A post-Catholic Ireland is simply a matter of historical fact. The old confessional monopoly is gone. And as I've argued this evening, we should not waste a single second longing for its return. But a post-secular Ireland is not a description of the past. It is a creative project to build together. It's a society where the Church holds no unearned privilege and exercises no coercive control, but where the voice of faith, whether it's Catholic, Pentecostal, Orthodox, Evangelical, Muslim, or otherwise, is welcomed. As long as it's humble and constructive and offering something that contributes to the common good. Ireland needs more than secular competence. When we face moral crises as profound as the 5,000 children who are homeless in this land of extraordinary affluence, the collapsing climate stability, the growing evidence of a mass extinction event, and the rise of racist hate being normalised on our streets, we need to be able to draw on all of the sources of wisdom available to us, even the ancient religious ones. Theologians have nothing to fear about dialoguing with more recent wisdoms that we have developed. We should be critical, but we should never be defensive. As I step down after nearly 10 years in this role, I leave with immense gratitude. I'm deeply thankful to the Irish Jesuits. I still don't understand why they created a space for an evangelical Presbyterian to experiment with this kind of reflection. I will be deeply grieved to lose my extraordinary colleagues at the Jesuit Centre for Faith and Justice who actually do the heavy lifting every day across housing and ecology and penal policy. And I'll miss all of you who have walked this narrow, high-altitude path with us. I'm shedding the title of social theologian, but I am not shedding the conviction that brought me here. In our post-secular present, our task is neither to retreat into an ecclesial bunker, nor to surrender our soul to bureaucratic spreadsheets. Our task is the patient, unglamorous, beautiful work of bearing witness to justice, which is nothing less than love expressed in public. Thank you very much.